Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today I want to talk about 10 ideas, 10 rules, 10 guidelines for if you are a guitar player or a musician that wants to start going out and playing live shows. If you're someone who has been playing 3 or 4 nights a week for the last 20 years, this video probably isn't for you. You probably know these things. There still might be a few things you could pick up, but if you're a road dog, you've got this down pat. But if you're just starting to get into either playing gigs, maybe you've got a few under your belt, or you're just thinking about getting started and wanting to dip your toe in those waters, I think these 10 ideas will be helpful to you and hopefully make your experience a more pleasant one and save you some headaches along the way. So let's jump into it. Okay, so the first idea or guideline on this list is know the songs. This seems very simple on the surface, but don't skip it. Make sure you know the songs that you're going to play in your set list forwards and backwards. Don't just play along with the track or the YouTube video and think you have it. I cannot tell you how many times I've sat down with the track, sat down, watched the video, played along, nailed every part, then turned the video off and either played by myself or went to play it with the band and realized, oh, it's not quite ingrained in me just yet. It is very easy to do it when you have something to go by, so to speak. So think about that as you're learning songs. And again, just make sure that in every song, you know what's coming next, what the part is, where you don't have to think about it when you're on the gig. Thought is the enemy of playing good music. If you have to think about the next part, it will distract you. It can bring some apprehension. You can tighten up. Just make sure that everything becomes second nature before you actually get to the gig. That's going to be some preparation on your own time, and as much preparation with the band as you can do as well, because that's going to be very helpful in getting the band to be one tight, cohesive unit. At the end of the day, though, just make sure that you are familiar with the songs so that when you get to the show and you're playing, you don't have to think about the parts. It just flows naturally, and you can be in the moment and in the performance. So the second thing on our list is make sure you have the right equipment for the job. If you're going to be playing in a Metallica tribute band, you probably don't want to show up with a Telecaster and a Fender Twin Reverb. If you're going to be playing a country gig, you most likely don't need a shredder guitar and a high-gain amplifier. So make sure if you're going to join a cover band that's doing primarily rock music or a blues group or a country group, just make sure you have what you need, the right tools for that job. If you're starting out and you may not be as familiar with all of the different types of amplifiers and guitars and what each one is good at and is geared for, go look at the bands that you're going to be covering. See what they use. It'll give you a really good starting point in knowing if you're going to be playing Led Zeppelin, what did Jimmy Page play with? Les Paul, Marshall. If you're going to be doing Jimi Hendrix, Strat into a Marshall. So it doesn't mean that you have to use what they use, but it will give you a good general idea that if they're using this and these are the kind of tones they're getting, it would make sense for me to look for something in that ballpark. And again, you're going to show up, it's going to be a better experience because you're not going to be trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. So bottom line, have the right gear for the job. So the next thing on the list, number 3, and sometimes this can be tricky logistically, but you really want to try to test out your rig at gig volume. When you play at home, if you're in an apartment or if your home situation is such that you can't blast a 100-watt amplifier without making your neighbors or your family in your home extremely aggravated with you, it can be a little difficult. Try to figure out a way. Maybe your band maybe one person in the band has a garage you can use, or you guys maybe rent a rehearsal space. But at some point, it is, in my opinion, pretty important to try to test your rig out at gig volumes because it just doesn't sound the same quiet as it does loud. Also, your amplifier might sound really great quiet, and you get to, a rehearsal or a gig. Hopefully you find this out at rehearsal, and you find out your amp doesn't have enough clean headroom, or it isn't loud enough, or any number of reasons or issues. And if you're using digital modeling, it's super easy because of all the features. And a lot of times, I actually use headphones a lot myself. I've figured out ways to counteract the issues of headphones and volume. I've kind of found what works for me. But a lot of people will use headphones to dial in their tones at home, and they're dialing them in at a relatively low volume. So that when they do get to a rehearsal or a gig and they turn those patches up to gig volume, it just doesn't sound right, doesn't sound the same. Another key factor why I think this is important to be playing at gig volume, particularly with your band, is sometimes even if you're playing at home at the right volume level, at an adequate level, your tones might sound good in isolation, but when you play with the band, they get lost. That's not always a volume issue. You have to think about the fact that the guitar, particularly the electric guitar, really lives in the mid-range section of the frequency spectrum. You may have pulled out all your mid-ranges and get that scoop sound, and it sounds really good, chugging along some power chords at home. You get to the band and it just kind of goes nowhere in the mix. It's hard to hear. And at that point, it turns into a volume war, and you try to keep getting louder and louder because you think that might be the issue. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just the case of you're not putting your tone in the right spot of the frequency range to stand out from the rest of the band, which can be very important. So if you get to rehearsal and you're playing and you're just finding a hard time standing out in the mix, before you just crank the volume up, dial your EQ in a little bit, particularly pay attention to the mid-range. I would say from 600 to 700 hertz up to 2 to 3K in that range. Play around with that. And surprisingly, sometimes tones that aren't your favorite in isolation work really well in a band setting. I've had this happen a lot of times where, I'll have a tone, I'll get it dialed in, and I think, that's a little honky. It's got something that I'm not loving. But when I put it in the context of the band, it fits perfectly. So another reason to, again, not only just play it at gig level, but play it at gig level with your band. And if your band has a way to record rehearsals and go back and listen to the audio, even if it's just setting up your smartphone and videoing the band, from out front where the crowd will be, that'll give you a pretty good idea of how things are working and how things are sitting in the mix. So pay attention to that, and the end result will be a lot better for you. So number 4 is make sure that your rig is ready to travel. And what I mean by that is that, say if you have pedals and a pedal board, make sure everything is mounted properly, your patch cables are run, your power supply is all sorted out. You don't want to show up with a bunch of loose pedals and a bag full of tangled cables you have to untangle every time you get to the show, and power adapters running everywhere. You want it to be as concise and neat as possible. If you're having to wire your pedal board every time you go to a gig, there's a good chance you might miss a connection. There'll be extra wear and tear on the cables. Things will wear out faster. You can have cables go bad. And it just takes a lot of the stress and headache off you if you don't have to do that. And if you're a tube amp guy and you have a nice tube amp, think about investing in a road case. It'll make it easier to transport, easier to get on and off stage. And really, to me, getting on stage and set up quickly is important for a lot of reasons, not just the fact that it makes your life easier. I've played shows where there would be 3, 4, 5 bands on the bill, sometimes having as little as 15 minutes for the changeover. So you may run into situations where it will be a big problem if it takes you 45 minutes to set up your rig. You may not always have that luxury. So keep that in mind. Have it ready to travel, and have cases for everything. I mentioned the road case for the amplifier. Have good cases or good gig bags for your guitars. Nice pedal board case. If you're using a digital modeler like I do, I have the Helix backpack that is great, travels well. I can throw it in the car. It's really well padded because you want to protect your equipment. You invest a lot of money in it. You want to protect it, and you want to know that it's going to be in good condition and work when you get to the show. So make sure your rig is well put together, easy to set up and tear down, and travels well. Okay, so number 5 is have a backup plan for anything that could go wrong. At bare minimum, bring extra picks, strings, cables, any of the small stuff that might need to be changed out. I always bring at least 2 guitars to a gig because string breaks happen. I've many times had a string break on stage. Sometimes I'm able to just quickly grab and switch guitars during a song, but worst case, get to the end of the song, make it through, switch guitars out. You don't have to stop the show to change a string or anything like that. You can always do that during set breaks. Also, if you use an amplifier, plan for what might happen if your amplifier stops working. Personally, I think a good solution for that is one of the amp and a pedal type products that are on the market. If you have, say, a Vox AC30, there are several pedals just dedicated to sounding like an AC30. Having one of these on your pedal board could save the day. If your amp goes down, you can have a signal to feed to the front of house that will sound in the ballpark of what you were getting. It may not give you the same good feeling and joy as hearing a cranked AC30 behind you, but the show will go on, and that's the main thing. And if you use a digital modeler, I use, again, the Line 6 Helix. I take a Line 6 Pod Go with me to a show, to every show. And while it doesn't have all the bells and whistles and it wouldn't be as comfortable as my normal rig, it'll get me through very easily. I can do a show with it, no problem. Gives me peace of mind. Knock on wood, never had to use it at a live show. Helix has always performed flawlessly, but it gives me peace of mind and helps me be a little more relaxed knowing that if something happens, I can plug that in, get back to playing, and then I can deal with the breakdown of my main unit later after the show and get that all worked out. But as they say, the show must go on. So have a backup plan in mind for anything that could fail in your rig. So number 6 is get to the gig on time. If you and your bandmates travel separately to the gig, it's very rude to get there an hour after everyone because most small bands have to set up their own gear, and lots of times that means the PA system. So if you get there late and your bandmates have had to put all the time and trouble into unloading and setting up the PA, and you just waltz in and set your guitar and amp down and you're ready to go, it's going to be aggravating for the people you're in a band with, I guarantee you. Also, if your band travels together to shows, make sure you get there on time or preferably early because venue owners, they don't like having to wait. A lot of times, if it's a bigger venue, they're paying a sound guy. So if you're an hour late, they're paying a sound guy to stand around. It throws everything behind schedule, especially if there are other bands on the bill, and it's just not professional. So make sure that you get to a show. Again, I suggest early, but certainly don't be late. Get there on time. So number 7 kind of dovetails in from number 6, and that's be professional, which involves number 6, being on time. But conduct yourself in a professional way. That doesn't mean uptight or anything like that. It just means, be a cool person to be around. Be nice to everyone. Be courteous. If you're at the venue, whether it's the owner, the bar staff, the sound guy, just act towards them as you want them to act towards you. Don't be a jerk. Don't go in with an ego or a chip on your shoulder. Your bandmates aren't going to like that either. There's nothing worse than going out and having a good night, getting a good crowd. Everybody makes good money and has a good time, but the venue owners, they were so hard to work with, we're not having them back. And it only takes one person in the band to ruin it for everybody. Don't be that person. It's not a hard thing to do. Just be a cool person. Be the kind of person you'd want to have in your band. Be the kind of person, if you own a venue, you'd want to book. In general, be the kind of person you'd want to be around. Treat people like you want to be treated. Be professional. It'll make your life easier. Number 8 is just promote your gigs. And to be honest, it's never been easier with social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all these different means we can get the word out. We can create a community. Also get a mailing list for the people that come to your show if you can. Also get creative. Don't just share posts. Think of things like maybe a contest. Just as a thought, maybe offer the winner of this contest is going to get a free band shirt, but they have to come to the show to get it. Hopefully they'll bring a bunch of friends with them. That's just one idea. Just sit around with your band and brainstorm and try to come up with things. Also, when you are playing, almost all venues are going to have a social media page. Be sure you tag them. If it's a Facebook event, make them the co-host of the event. Try to let them know also, as well as letting your fans know about the show. Let the venue know that you're working to bring people as well. They'll appreciate that, and it'll show that you have initiative as a band. And at the end of the day, if no one shows up to your gigs, it's very unlikely you're going to get rebooked at that venue. And that's not fun for anybody. So promote your gigs, build an audience, and it'll help get people out to your show and show them a good time. So number 9 is a little more abstract. There's not a definite physical thing like prepare your cables or, do a Facebook post. This one is visualize how you want the gig to go. I've actually found this to be quite helpful. It's a way of getting your brain trained for what you're going to do at the show. In the same way in the first step, like know the songs where it's second nature, visualizing how you want the show to go and how you want to perform and what you want to do, in my experience, can actually help that happen much more easily. It becomes much more second nature. Something as simple as, I'm going to play a solo in this song. I want to be in this spot of the stage when I do it. And maybe I want to hold the guitar a certain way. Maybe it's, every other song, I'm going to walk over and kind of jam with the bass player a little bit, or turn around and kind of lock in with the drummer. Just think about these things and visualize them so that when you're on stage, you're not just standing there strumming, because that's, first of all, it's not fun to watch. But for me personally, it's boring. If I'm going to be bored on stage, I don't want to be there. I want to really enjoy myself. And that helps me just visualizing. Also, watching artists that I like, seeing how they perform. If it's inspiring to me, visualize maybe using some of their techniques, some of the things they do on stage, adapt that and work it and make it your own can be very helpful. And think about this as another way to be creative on stage. Visualize yourself performing the music, not just standing there playing it. Just visualize how you want the gig to go. It's going to be different for everyone. There's not a formula to this, but it will build in the same way playing builds in muscle memory. I think visualization brings in like mental memory, if that's a thing, to where things just start to flow more naturally on stage. And you don't really have to think about them as much. And that brings us to the number 10 spot on this list, which to me ties everything together. That is, have fun. If you're not having fun, the crowd is most likely not going to enjoy it nearly as much. I've seen bands play where it just looked like they were going through the motions. They were standing there. Maybe inside they were doing cartwheels, but what they presented to the crowd was someone just standing there being very solemn, very straight ahead, just getting through the songs. I don't enjoy watching that, and I certainly don't enjoy performing that way at all. It's not fun for me. And again, I think having fun is contagious. If you're enjoying yourself, I do think it's going to lead most likely to your bandmates enjoying themselves more, because it's a community thing you're doing. You're playing music with other people on the stage. If one person's having a good time, it might inspire the other, the bass player is going to see it. Maybe you walk over to his side of the stage, you're getting into it together. And the more everyone is having a good time, it just makes for a better show. I think the audience feeds off that energy. And in turn, if the audience is having that energy build and they're having a good time, then as the band, you feel that and you start to build even higher off that energy, and it turns into a feedback loop. And for me, that is one of the pinnacles of what is fun and what I like about going out and playing live music. I like those moments where you feel like you get into a flow state, and what that means is it feels like the world around you disappears. The only thing that exists is you in the moment, you playing. And it's kind of a surreal feeling, and it's amazing. A couple things that I like to do if, say, the show isn't going as well as you hope, or it's not as fun as you wanted it to be, or you're not as into it as you want it to be. Let's say you promote a gig for a month or two, and a dozen people show up, and it's defeating, and you're not hyped, because no one came. Relatively, no one came. One of the things I'll do is I'll look out and I'll find one person in the crowd, and I'll play the show mentally. I'll play the show like I'm playing it to them. So it gives me a direct connection with the audience, even if it's just that one person. And it gives me someone to perform to, rather than going, there's nobody out there. It's just, whatever, let's get through this. I'll look at it as I'll focus on that person. I'll make them important to me. So therefore, I'm going to perform like I'm doing a meaningful show. And it helps get me there to that place that I've been talking about, where, I get into it. It's fun. I feel that energy coming back and forth from, well, in this case, maybe just one person, but from the crowd. And to me, it's just been very helpful. It's been a very helpful technique. And the funny thing about that technique is it also can work on the other end of the spectrum. Let's say you get invited to play a show opening for a bigger band, and you're in front of a couple thousand people when you're used to playing for 30 to 50. It can be overwhelming and intimidating, and take you out of your comfort zone. And when that happens, sometimes you tend to tighten up and get a little more, a little more tense and a little less loose. So I actually do the same thing in those scenarios. I find one person in the crowd and I play to them. That way, the other 1,999 people kind of fade into the background and disappear. And again, it helps me get in that mindset I want to get in that mode I want to get in, and hopefully just get to where things are flowing, and takes me back to the point of number 10, have fun. And lastly, on this concept of having fun, is it helps me when I remember why I started doing this. When I remember how I felt the first time I heard fill in the blank, the first time I heard Led Zeppelin, the first time I heard Stevie Ray Vaughan, whoever it is for you, and getting to stand up in front of a crowd and not just play, but perform those songs, it takes that feeling I got when I heard that and takes it even to a higher level, because I'm not just listening, I'm participating. And that really helps me enjoy what I'm doing even that much more, and takes it to another level. So think about that. Try to remember, if you go to play one of your favorite songs, remember how you felt the first time you heard that song, and try to feel it and project it. And I think it makes a big difference. I really do. Okay, so those are my 10 guidelines for what I think is most helpful and necessary if you're a guitar player or a musician starting to go out and play shows. At the end of the day, you want to have fun, you want to enjoy it. That's why you're doing it. A lot of the work that goes in can feel like work when you're rehearsing with a band for weeks on end to get ready for your first show, carrying, setting up, tearing down your gear, spending hours at home learning songs, all this stuff that goes into it. It's fun, but after a while doing enough of it, it can start to feel like work. So keep in mind what your payoff is, and the payoff is the show. So if you are thinking about gigging and you haven't yet, I encourage you to do so. Try it. It can be a little intimidating if you've never done it. Almost all new things in life are that way. Don't let that stand in your way. Go out and try it. Worst thing, you don't have a good time. Maybe it doesn't go well. Maybe you decide it's not for you. You know what? You tried it. You went out and you tried something. And I don't think that's ever a failure. But likely, I think you're going to enjoy it and want to do it again. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please like, comment, subscribe. It helps out the channel. I always appreciate the interaction I have with you guys in the comments. So please leave some below. If there are things I didn't talk about that you found helpful with your gigs and shows, please put that down below. I'd love to hear it. Until the next one, we'll see you.